73 live betting show on Punt School and the Trademate channels. Actually, there is no Punt School channels today, I believe, but hopefully we get a little retweet there. Few problems with the Punt School side of things, so we're just going to stream it today on the Trademate channel, and hopefully by next week we'll have things eradicated. But yeah, UFC 273 headlined by the Australian himself, Alexander Volkanovski, facing off against the Korean Zombie. Also got, and that's for the featherweight title, and then you've also got Jan and Sterling, the rematch there for the bantamweight title. So yes, I will be going through obviously those two fights, the two bigger fights on the card, and along with that, be going with the other main card fights. So Vinc Pichel versus Madsen, Mackenzie Dern versus Tecia Torres, and also Gilbert Burns versus Khamzat Chimaev. As always, for those who've been tuning in on the Punt School side of things, I won't be giving away bets for every single fight, just two today. Just need to be respectful to those who pay a subscription fee to MMA Punt School and use their hard-earned dollars to get all the good stuff. So we'll get into it. Kick things off with Vinc Pichel versus Madsen. And yeah, all the markets I'll get up today will be courtesy of Top Sport. I will get my screen. So as you can see here, you've got Pichel at 1.78 and then Madsen at 2.03. Go through some of the props soon, but a lot of these encounters on the card, there's a lot of striker versus wrestler or striker versus grappler kind of encounters on this card. I think this is another great example of it. I think if for anyone that's seen the Austin Hubbard fight against Madsen, I think it could go pretty similar to that with a few variations. I think Pichel's a more dangerous striker than Hubbard, but I feel like there's potential that he hasn't got the same get up game that Hubbard has, but that's totally up for debate. So I would say overall this is a harder fight for Madsen, who was able to win the first two rounds in that fight, and then lost the third as he wasn't really able to implement his wrestling anymore, and kind of got outstruck on the feet. I think Madsen will be able to get Pichel down pretty consistently throughout the fight, but I do think he may struggle to keep him down for long periods. That's kind of where I think that's just where it's obvious Madsen's going to be able to get him down. As long as the fight goes past a certain point in time, as long as he doesn't get, flying knee to the face or anything like that within 5 seconds. We know that. We know that Madsen's going to be able to get him down. We also know that Pichel's a better striker. So for me, the swinging point in this fight where, the winner of this battle will come out on top is the ground. And, can Pichel get up very quickly after he's taken down? Or can Madsen hold him there for periods of time? Or, let's just say, 5 minutes of the round, can he hold him down for 4 minutes? Can he, take him down 3 times in the round and each time hold him down for a minute each time? These are the questions that'll be answered on Saturday or Sunday, whatever time you're watching it. But I think that's the swinging point for this fight in terms of who will come out on top. But yeah, like I said, you saw in that third round of that Hubbard fight, Hubbard had a lot more success landing strikes and keeping things on the feet once Madsen got a little bit tired. I wouldn't say he was gassed or anything, but yeah, just a little bit more tired. And, I guess just tired from Hubbard constantly getting up. And then he was able to outstrike him on the feet, which is pretty understandable given Madsen's, being pretty young in his MMA career, and he hasn't been able to, his striking's certainly improving. He looked much better against Guida, but I think Pichel's on a different level to Guida. Any moment this fight is on the feet, it's very dangerous for Madsen. it only really takes one big strike from Pichel. He's got decent power, and it could all be over just one strike. So I wouldn't be surprised even if Madsen got him down 3-4 times in a round. But, Pichel lands a few decent shots. He could get the win. Just, he could win the round, or, obviously he could get a knockout, but if he just lands a few decent shots every round, and even though he gets taken down a couple times, maybe doesn't take too much damage, maybe doesn't get held down for too long, and then he comes back up to the feet and lands a few big strikes, you could see him stealing rounds that way potentially. So in terms of prices, it's pretty close to 50-50 for me. As you've seen in the odds, they kind of represent that at the moment, which I'll get back up. I would have Pichel as favourite, but very slight. No lower than a 185 or something like that. So I don't really see any value in those money line odds at the moment with Top Sport. I think there's some interesting prop bets around. You've got Pichel decision no bets, quite interesting, because I think Madsen might find it quite hard to finish Pichel. I would say Madsen's best chance would probably be via submission, some kind of front choke of some sort. He's got good darts. He was always trying to work something against I think it was Hubbard from memory, if memory serves me right. So I think this is an interesting way of approaching things. You got there's nothing really I see here that stands out. I think just double chance is kind of interesting for Madsen here. If you made me have a bet, I'd probably be looking at him to win by submission or decision. I couldn't really see him getting a knockout. I think people would assume maybe he's got a chance of getting a ground and pound finish, but I think Pichel's too slick to be able to get stuck on the ground. So there's a few ideas for you all. But yeah, for me, no official bet here, really. Next, we'll go with Dern and Torres. This is an awesome fight. I really love these kind of fights where it's basically a 50-50 fight, but you've got two completely different fighters, and it's, it'll be interesting to see how this one plays out. So you've got Torres 1.97 with Top Sport, and then you've got Dern at 1.84. One moment. So, yeah, another striker versus grappler encounter here. Torres being the striker, Dern being the grappler. I think Dern's pretty outmatched on the feet by Torres. I mean, she is improving with her striking, Dern, every fight. But, yeah, I mean, Torres has got a wealth of experience on the feet. She'll be faster and she'll be looking to dart in with flurries like she normally does, because she's normally at quite a reach or size disadvantage in all of her fights. She's only 5'1". I think Dern's 5'4" from memory. So for her striking to be effective, and it is effective the way she does it, she kind of just darts in and out, gets into range, gets out. Because when she's, standing there at someone else's range, she could just potentially get jabbed apart, kicked, all that kind of stuff. So she's quite good at coming in and out and being effective with her striking in that way. But I think that darting kind of style could leave her open to some takedowns from Dern. You just get worried that if she darts in, if Dern's smart enough, the thing is her wrestling is not too great, but if she's smart with her timing, I think she could easily time Torres a few times, who can come in, with a flurry of punches, and it could just leave her exposed. Momentum going forward, Dern's momentum going the other way. Drops lower, gets the takedown. So that's a massive avenue to get this to the ground for Dern. Up against the cage too, I guess she'll be open to takedowns also. Torres will, because she's a much smaller fighter, so I can see her being overpowered at times and pushed back against the cage. Dern doesn't, like I said, Dern doesn't really have great wrestling, but all she needs is one takedown, and this fight could be over within seconds or minutes, depending how much time's on the clock for the round. I think her her wrestling and her trips are good enough. I think they're at a good enough level now, and Torres's takedown defense is at a bad enough level. Not really a great way of putting it, but I think it's Torres's takedown defense is kind of at a level, and Dern's wrestling is kind of at a level where I think Dern can get her down at least a couple of times, and enough for me to say enough time to get a submission and enough time, to potentially win 2 rounds by keeping her on the ground. Dern doesn't have an awful, like I said, Dern doesn't have awful striking either. So if Torres, she does have to worry about the striking too in a way. She can't just be, just worried about the takedowns and, throw her hands and then, sprawl and brawl kind of thing. She does have to, she has to worry about Dern's hands a little bit too. So I would, I've basically got it where the odds are now are essentially where I'm at too. I'll just get up Top Sports odds. I would have Dern as favourite like it is now. I think these odds are pretty well right at the moment. I think if you wanted to go for Dern, if you wanted to bet Dern, I would be looking at Dern via sub or deck. It's hard though because I assume she's got such good top game that if she wanted to, I feel like she could unleash punches on Torres and get a finish that way. But she just never really used it before, so I'd be pretty wary of that sub or deck. I personally wouldn't take that. And I think if you want to bet Torres, there's just only one way, and that's to win by decision. I mean, I just can't really see her getting a finish at all. But I think 2.3 is very short for decision. So, I wouldn't go much lower than that. I'd probably have a small bet at 2.3. I think those odds are just about right. I wouldn't even bet that. So yeah, if it gets the blows, hopefully you can get 2.5, maybe 2.45, something like that. Then you'd interest me in Torres' decision. Torres just hasn't got much power at all, and I couldn't imagine her submitting Mackenzie Dern. That would be incredible. All right, let's move on to the people's main event. I'll just have a drink of water first. I've got to get ready for this one. This is very much, I think, the fight that people are most looking forward to over the 2 title fights. I know myself, I'm much more excited about this fight than the other 2 fights on the card. Khamzat has just become a phenomenon, really. It's the interest around him is crazy. But anyway, I won't babble on. You've probably all heard about that before. From a betting perspective, I don't think it's very. I don't think it's a great fight to bet on, but I mean, it's an awesome fight. So let's just talk about it anyway. There's just so many unknowns about Khamzat at the moment. You can make assumptions, of course. How good his wrestling is, how good his ground game is, how good his striking is. I think overall, how good his cardio is another one. I think overall you can say the only thing we know we know lots about him is his ground game and his wrestling. Like his wrestling is superb. There's no doubt about that. But how good is it? Like, we've seen him toss around some decent fighters, but Burns is like 20 levels up on, someone like Ji Liang. I mean, I think Khamzat can get him down, but this is a huge leap in competition from Jiang Liang. I've got to get that name down, Pat, but I can't remember which way it goes. So yeah, we know that he's got great wrestling. We know that he's got strong top game, but this is against fighters that are not on Burns's level. So it's very hard to get a good gauge on exactly where his skill level is at. You would assume it's very, very high just because of the way he dominates in those positions. It's not like, he wins rounds or whatever. he's finishing guys straight away. Like this, it's not even competition down there. Anyway, yeah. Firstly, important to note, he's got a massive size advantage, I think, in this one. He will have the reach advantage in the striking, and I think he'll be the bigger, most likely stronger man in wrestling and grappling exchanges. The stand-up is, probably the biggest unknown in this fight, as we've basically only seen Khamzat strike for 17 seconds, where he knocked out Meerschaert and he threw one punch. I mean, the rest afterwards were just, they weren't needed. He was gone anyway. He looked great for those 17 seconds, cut the cage off beautifully, got him into a corner, one punch, see you later. Obviously got big power, it seems. But it's not enough to come up with any certain conclusions on his level of striking. What does it look like in round 3 when he's tired, or at least, more tired than he is at the beginning of a fight, and done lots of wrestling. But yeah, that's for striking. I think in the wrestling, I would lean towards Khamzat having an advantage there. The way he's been able to ragdoll people has been very impressive, but like I said before, Burns is a lead in that department too, so we'll have to work harder than ever before to get a takedown. On the ground, if Khamzat can establish top position, it's going to be extremely hard for Burns to get him off of him, to get back to his feet. Even though Burns has great BJJ, we've never really seen him impose himself at welterweight. Which is interesting. You go back through his record at lightweight, he was able to get 4 submissions in the UFC. And as soon as he's come up to welterweight, he hasn't been able to get 1 submission yet. So you can make assumptions there that he's probably struggling. I mean, I would say there's definitely a skill level difference between the guys he was fighting at welterweight and lightweight. He's fighting better competition at welterweight. But still, he hasn't gotten 1 submission yet. So I assume, or I'm thinking, that he's struggling a bit more with the size of these welterweights to be able to get them out of there with a submission. The odds are ridiculous, in my opinion. I mean, I don't really see how you can have Khamzat so short. It is all a lot of it's hype based. It's all like, don't get me wrong, Khamzat could be the next big thing, but it's all, the odds are based on assumptions that he is the next greatest thing. It's not through evidence, really. I mean, it is through evidence in a way, because people have seen how he's been able to dominate fights, but it's not, it's not like he hasn't earned those odds, the odds that he's got now, 120, 115, whatever it is at the moment, over someone like Burns, who seriously is, in my eyes, he's, I think the rankings say it too, he's the 3rd best welterweight in the world behind Covington and Usman. So, I mean, they could be right. The odds on Khamzat could be right. He could walk in and absolutely destroy Burns, but it's just like that. It's all just hypothetical. It's all assumptions. Just because people, get so hyped about a fighter, they're just assuming he's going to walk through Burns, which is kind of what those odds represent. And I just don't think he's earned those kind of odds yet. If I had to price it, I know that the bookmakers have to essentially balance the books, and that's why his price is so low. We just don't. He could have terrible cardio, and he could have average striking, and we just wouldn't know, because we haven't seen a big enough sample size. So I would have. I mean, I don't think that he's got terrible cardio or average striking. I'm just saying he could potentially. Anyway, we'll find out eventually. I would have. Sorry, I'll just have a water. I would have Chimaev priced closer to 1.4, 1.5 kind of area. That doesn't mean I want to bet on Burns personally, just because we just don't know about Chimaev. He should be priced at 1.1 or something like that, and then you just don't know. So I would price if I had to price him, say Chimaev around 1.4, but I think it's just not even worth betting at all this fight. Let's just enjoy the mayhem. Chimaev's got massive upside. He's still young, coming up. Gilbert's towards the back end-ish of his career. And I think Chimaev will have the advantage in the grappling or wrestling. Don't know about the striking, but that's just kind of how I see it at the moment. Props-wise, I'll have a look here for you all. One I definitely wouldn't go near is Chimaev by sub. I think if you think Chimaev is going to get a finish, it's probably going to be knockout. So just because Gilbert's, great jiu-jitsu, so it's hard to see where, I think he'd be able to defend most of Khamzat's attempts. Famous last words. Double chance markets. I'll see. Oh, no, not getting on the double chance here. But yeah, maybe look at, Chimaev KO deck and rule out the sub. For Burns, I mean, his money line odds are pretty tempting in general, but if you wanted to go for a prop bet, I mean, he could get it done in a number of ways, but I guess decision is most likely. But yeah, I would, if you want to back Burns, I think you just back him on the money line to get the win at 4.3 or potentially more by the time this kicks off. So yeah, that's that one, and we'll move on to the first title fight. So you've got Jan here at 1.19, and you've got Sterling at 4.7. So the rematch. As shown in the first fight, Sterling struggled to get this fight into his domain, which is the ground, work submissions, all that kind of stuff. It was actually Jan who won most of the wrestling exchanges and was able to get Sterling on his back a lot of the time. So I would expect the fight to play out mostly on the feet. And there's no secret to who has the advantage there, especially later in the fight, as we saw last time. It'll be interesting to see Sterling's game plan for this one, because I kind of think his best chance of winning exchanges on the feet is what he did in the first, second-ish round, which was going with a high volume approach, getting in his face, pressuring him, and just trying to outpoint him, because he knows that if he gets into a points fight with Jan, if he tries to make it very low output and hit him with a nice strike here and there, he's got to essentially make it very ugly to get the win, I think. So I think Sterling's best chance overall is probably just to do what he did the first fight, and hopefully his cardio holds up a little bit more. Try and win the first 3 rounds or something like that, just through sheer relentlessness, and maybe be a little bit less reckless. Maybe just tighten things up a little bit. Maybe don't go with the same kind of pace. Maybe just bring that pace back a little bit. Try and win the first 3 rounds, and just look to overwhelm Jan a bit. Other things to keep in mind. Sterling mentioned. I think he mentioned that he didn't eat or something on fight day. So for the last fights, that's something to keep in mind, that potentially he wasn't at his best cardio wise because he didn't eat anything on the day of the fight. He's had some stomach problems or something. I can't really remember. He also spent the last year nursing an injury on the sidelines. He had a neck injury, which I kind of think is quite significant. So I think that kind of takes, moves things out of his favor a lot. So yeah, a few things to factor in there. Jan also has the upside. He's still young, getting better every fight. But yeah, I really think that Sterling's only chance of winning this fight is by getting a flashy KO, or somehow finding a submission out of nowhere in a scramble or something like that. So I would price, similar to how the Sandhagen fight went for Sterling. But I overall think this is a even harder fight for Sterling this time around. Jan's just so patient in the first couple of rounds to get his reads, and then he kind of unloads after that. And I think, he's got his reads on Sterling now, essentially. As long as he doesn't completely change things up, he knows he's got a way better idea of what he's going to offer. And I think that's why it kind of makes it an even harder fight for him to employ his game into. Looking at the I think there's definitely a bet here. Props, I think we'll lock in this as our first bet of the day. Peter Yan via KO or decision at 1.33. I think that's a good bet. I price Yan at what he is now, basically the money line 1.19. His chances of getting a submission are really low. So I would say the chances of him winning by knockout or decision, I would price it around 1.25. So I think 1.33 is a decent edge. Other ones to look out for, I think Yan KO is pretty interesting. But if you were, as I said before, if you really wanted to back, what's his name? Aljamain. If I can find, I'm not sure if they've got the markets up here for Sterling to win via a finish. Doesn't look like it to my naked eye right now. So, yeah, I think, I think you should be able to get Sterling via finish, maybe sevens or something like that, I would assume, maybe even bigger than that. So, I mean, what's he at for submission? Yeah, he's at 9.5 for submission. So I'd assume you should be able to get him to win by finish at something around 8 or 9. So I think if you want to back Sterling, that's a good bet. But yeah, for me, the KO deck angle for Yan is the best at Top Sport right now. But let's move on. Last one, the Aussie himself for the featherweight title. Volkanovski versus the Korean Zombie, or also referred to as Chan Sung Jung, his real name. I think this is a very tough fight for the Korean Zombie. Volkanovski's kind of superior in just about every discipline. Wrestling, grappling, jiu-jitsu, striking. I think on the feet, geez, I've got a very dry throat today. Give me a sec. I think on the feet, Volkanovski's just too tactical for Jung. I think you'll be able to outpoint him or find a KO later in the fight. I kind of expect Alex to just chip away with leg kicks, land combinations on Zombie, who's never been too interested in defense and just in general lacks footwork and movement, all this kind of stuff. The one thing he does have on the feet, though, Zombie, is he's got a big, maybe not a huge, but he's definitely got a power advantage. So Volkanovski really has to stay switched on. He's got a decent chin, Volkanovski, but he has been rocked by, Holloway twice in the second fight from memory. So he does have to stay switched on the whole fight, because just looking back at his recent opponents, Volkanovski, I'd probably say out of all of them, Zombie's probably got the biggest power out of all of them. So he can't get too reckless going in for a finish or just in general. He's got to stay pretty composed and look to kind of land not the perfect blow, but only go in when he knows Zombie's gone. I think he's just got to outpoint him and frustrate Zombie and wait for him to make a big mistake. Volkanovski, I think he's got the better wrestling too, but I don't think the gap's hugely wide, but I can definitely see Volk mixing in some takedowns just to keep Zombie on his toes, keep him guessing always. Wouldn't be surprised if Zombie did the same too and tried to work a few takedowns, but I couldn't see him. I struggled to see him taking Volkanovski down for one, and two, just spending time on his back, Volkanovski, because he's so good at scrambling once he hits the ground. If they do spend time on the ground, it's probably where it's most even. Volkanovski's very much a ground and pound man if he's on top, whereas Zombie's got some great submissions in his arsenal. So, both are quite good offensively on the ground, but, when they're put in dangerous positions, like, Volk's got some serious ground and pound. I'm sure if he got Zombie on his back, he would be in a little bit of trouble there. But yeah, Zombie is very good on the ground. He's good at controlling positions. He's very flowy, as you saw in the Ige fight. He's pretty slick down there. Anyway, I think Volk's got many ways to win this fight, whereas I think Zombie winning is it's very heavily skewed towards a finish win. Most likely a knockout, but yeah, I mean, if they got caught in a scramble or somehow they made it to the ground, Zombie could potentially get a submission, but I think Zombie's chances of winning are very heavily skewed towards getting a knockout. But I just can't see him being able to outpoint Volkanovski for 3 rounds or control him on the ground for 3 rounds out of 5. So I do think though that the odds are too much for. I do think there is value with the Korean Zombie. So, sorry, they are my notes. I do think it's blown a little bit out of control, though. I think Volkanovski's shown a bit too much for me that he can be tagged at times. And the Zombie is so willing to be hit just to be able to, Zombie will probably be happy to take 3 punches to give one big one back. So I do think it's a little bit overblown, the odds, because I do think there is he's got a very good chance of finding a knockout here, the Zombie. So I would lock in this bet. I think 13s for Korean Zombie to win by KO is a little bit crazy. I think it's very crazy, actually. I mean, to say that Volkanovski has a better chance of getting a submission victory than Jung does a KO is kind of ludicrous, I think. I would even say Korean Zombie's got maybe a better chance of getting a submission than Volkanovski does. So I think these odds are kind of ridiculous for Zombie to get a KO. So I would lock in that. I think that's a great bet. I know it's going to disappoint a lot of you, as you probably want to back Volkanovski in some way. Being that I assume most people listening to this are Australian, but yeah, I think that's just the reality. I just don't see any value with Volkanovski anymore. I think all the values with Chan Sung Jung. I'm not just saying that because he's got the big odds. I think there's more, value in Petr Yan right now. So, and he's at 1.19. So, but I do think these odds have gone a bit over the top for Volkanovski. So yeah, that's how I would play it this weekend, folks. They are my 2 bets that I'm happy to share with everyone. Korean Zombie by KO and Petr Yan by KO or decision. But yeah, thanks for tuning in, everyone. If this is your first time on the channel or first time, hearing about MMA Punt School, jump onto my website at velabetting.com. I think I left a link in the description. Subscribe to all the good stuff. It's going pretty well at the moment. I think we're at an 8% ROI or something like that off the top of my head. So things are going well. And if it's your first time on the TradeMate channel, subscribe, like, do all the good stuff. Jump over to Twitter, make sure to follow Punt School, Top Sport, and all of them. And I will be back next week. I think there's a few weeks of fights coming up. So I'll be back next Thursday or Friday potentially, but probably Thursday for another live show. But yeah, enjoy the fights this weekend. It's a pretty decent card, and I will see you guys next